Hi, I'm Brad Kramer with Provenio Consulting. I do occupational safety and health, and today I'm here with Dominic from
Evo
Evo.
Performance Rehab. Yeah.
Sorry about that, Dominic from Evo.
Yep.
So you guys do performance rehab, like physical therapy. You want to talk a little bit more about what you guys do, what types of patients you work with, and things like that?
Yeah. So the proper term for it is going to be neurological soft tissue therapy. It's kind of in a different category than your classic physical therapy or chiropractic. So what we do is basically restoring the brain muscle connectivity and getting basically your body working optimally so that you can move more freely and also you recover from any pains or injuries you've had and keep those injuries at bay so that they don't come back. We have a special approach and technique to this in order to do this. We've worked with people from all types of pain injuries, from muscle, tendon, ligament, overuse, neurological issues, whether it also like sprains, strains, tears, a lot of disc issues, stuff like that. So, and it's all, we've worked with a lot of people from different trades who may have just continued to do repetitive motions that has caused muscle imbalance, caused overuse in one area, and eventually causes pain. So we work to reverse that and getting people back to how they were originally designed, so that they can get back to what they love to do and get back to work and do it well. So.
Yeah, and where I see this being very beneficial to employers and their employees is many times you think about what's your typical route for somebody that has an injury. Do you have an occupational medicine provider or physical therapist? Because many times when you have an employee that they get injured, say it's a musculoskeletal disorder, so they're shoulder strains, back strains, things like that. If they're not encouraged to see a physical therapist like Dominic here who can really treat that, a lot of times their first step is going to be going to the ER. And give you an example of a case I had several years ago that really got escalated beyond where it needed to. Was I had an employee that they were on a little platform. They stepped back, it was just a few inches, and they tweaked their back. So they went to the ER. Doctor gave them an opioid pain reliever.
Right, yeah.
And it turned into a recordable just because they had a pain reliever prescribed to them. Well, then the doctor gave them the pain reliever, and it became a lost time because it was an opioid. The doctor didn't want them going back to work, of course.
Right. Yeah.
So if that employee can go to somebody like yourself that can get to the root of the injury and actually treat it, that likely wouldn't have been a recordable or a lost time injury, which is a recordable by definition.
Yeah.
So it's better on the employer, and the employee is actually going to recover. You're going to get to the root of the injury, not just here's your medication, go home and rest for a few days, right?
Right, because the medication and the rest doesn't necessarily get to the root of the problem. It doesn't fix what caused it, because the long-term solution isn't necessarily to just solve the current injury, but is also to solve what caused it in the first place. Because if you can do that, you're going to be set up for success later on, so that for one, you don't so that you don't make the injury worse and that it doesn't happen again, so that you're going to be set up to continue to do your job and work and do it well, and not have to worry about falling into these old patterns that cause these issues. So
Yeah, and where you guys seem to really shine, and you're probably the best benefit that I've seen so far was, for example, you look at my posture. I need to learn to get my shoulders back a little, and I've been having some shoulder pain and stuff like that. And you have a machine, it uses electrodes. You want to talk a little bit about the different types of electrical patterns there are, or pulses,
right.
And the type of machine that you have.
Yeah. So ours over here is called the ARP Wave. I'm sure there's a handful of people who do know this technology and have used it before. But there are also a lot of different types out there. A lot of you might have maybe heard of something called a TENS unit. So that's completely, it's a different version. You can think of each different type of a stim machine speaks a different language in the body. It sends a different type of signal. A TENS unit, for instance, it's a little unit you can buy. Doctors prescribe it sometimes for pain. What that does is sends like a pain blocking signal. It doesn't let the pain signal get to the brain, so you have temporary relief. Doesn't really solve the problem, just gives you relief, helps you feel better a little bit. Doesn't, something called like a Russian stim, for instance, tells the muscle to shorten or contract. That's used for different therapies. Some athletes use it for training. Something called microstim increases blood flow to an area. So if you tore up your knee or you had surgery, you could put that type of stimulator in the area, pushing the blood flow there to help it heal faster because you're concentrating your resources on the damaged area. So all those are great and they all have their place, but what ours is doing, it's the signal it's sending is a signal of movement. It's speaking the language of movement. So wherever we have our electrodes, it is saying, muscle, do your job. And why that is so, do your job, absorb force, do what you were made to do, right? So, and why that is so useful to us is that we can actually use that signal to pinpoint these areas of neurological dysfunction. So say if you're work for a concrete company and you're bent over doing cement all day and you're feeling some issues in your back, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with your back or your back's not strong or something like that. What that means is that your brain is overworking the area. It's saying, I don't trust something else somewhere else in my body, so I need to put this force into my back because I don't trust something else. This machine finds out where those areas are that the brain doesn't trust, and then we can use the technology in our specific technique to get those areas communicating again to the brain, so that the next time you go to do your work on the cement and you're doing it for hours on end, your brain's going to know what to do. It's going to know where to put that force so that you no longer put the strain on your back.
Exactly. And I've seen other videos that you have, like on website and stuff like that, that actually shows this in use. So we won't go there, but he just did that for me on my shoulder to figure out where am I moving incorrectly. And it was a really interesting process. Like, when you hit the spots where my muscle wasn't quite moving correctly, I could feel that. Mm-hmm. And it guided it to the right motion, so that once you took it off, I was moving correctly. Yeah. And could really feel that difference, versus just getting a set of exercises to go home and do this exercise. This really seemed to train me into the right motions, right?
Yeah, it's the machine, part of what it does is it's sending very clear instructions on how to use your muscle. And while that machine is building that new muscle memory, that pathway, and myself as a coach giving cues so that the client can hold the proper position and go through the motion, the brain is more likely to, it's going to relearn how to do that motion, so that the next time you go to do either your reaching for something on the shelf or putting your arm behind your back, it's going to know not to throw that force into where you've been feeling the pain. It's going to know, I can utilize these other areas. I don't have to overwork this area anymore. And then if we do that enough times, that becomes the new pattern. It becomes the new muscle memory, the new place where our bodies automatically fall, right? So that the next time you go to do something, an exercise or a movement or something in your work, you're going to fall into the correct position and you're not going to experience that same pain. So it's ultimately a very lasting recovery, because we are giving you the tools to hold your results for the long term, because it's not always enough to just get something fixed and then just go back to the way you lived your life. If you don't change what caused it and change your patterns, those issues are either going to come back or something else is going to happen. So we can give our clients the tools in order to maintain their results for the long term. So yeah.
So if let's say I worked at a desk, this doesn't have to be all intensive like laborer positions, but if you work at a desk and you're looking at your monitor and you tend to start to slouch in and stuff like that, this is a great way to train yourself to get in that proper posture.
Absolutely.
And so, like, let's say I work at my desk and I get a sore neck every day, and finally I decide that I want to, get checked out, or because this is getting so uncomfortable. Now, typically, we might just look at your posture and maybe improve how your desk is. But in your case, what you're going to do is improve that posture kind of from the source, so that when you go back to work, you're actually going to be sitting correctly with your shoulders back in that right posture.
Yeah, you fall into that proper posture without your brain wanting to go back to its old ways, right?
Yes, and then that way you're eliminating like those potential injuries down the road.
Absolutely.
So had I just say adjusted my monitor and maybe did a few stretches, or just did some exercises to strengthen this, I could easily fall back into that slouch again. Whereas what you do is actually going to likely prevent future injuries, prevent those future cases of your neck getting stiff and all the headaches and stuff like that. So depending on what job people are doing, I mean, that could be different motions. But if you have employees that they're doing a lot of say strenuous work, and they may be re-injuring that shoulder, or constantly guarding, like especially if they're doing movements where they're guarding themselves because they've had an injury, and their brain goes, okay, we need to protect this part of our body, and so that causes certain muscles to jump in, if I'm not explaining it correctly, but certain muscles will kind of relax and other muscles jump in and take over, guarding it. I could really feel that process of which muscles were guarding, and once they started to activate because of what he was doing, it made a big difference in my movement. So it was really interesting. I don't think I could describe the feeling
unless you tried it. That's what most people say. Yeah, absolutely.
So the first time I watched the video, I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But when I tried it, I was like, whoa, that works. And when you took it off, those motions were much more natural.
Yeah.
And they seem to work. So,
like before when we started, right here he has an issue pulling his arm behind his back, and he gets to a certain point and he feels this pain to go shoot down his bicep, and immediately after we worked on the machine doing the movements that we needed to do for 5 minutes, and by the end of that, so we did the same test. I had him do the same motion, and you said it was hardly there at all, right?
Yep.
Correct. So we were able to get this huge result within minutes because we gave the body very clear instructions on how to work. Like his brain no longer said, I need to throw this force into down my bicep. I can utilize these other areas, which for him was like his bicep tendon area, and also a muscle called your infraspinatus, which is like on your scapula. Those guys weren't being utilized properly. So when we got them active again, he was able to do that same motion without any issues. So, and like I said, if we do that enough times, it's going to become the new pattern. It's going to become where he automatically falls. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I've been dealing with a little bit of frozen shoulder, so probably some scar tissue from a previous injury, stuff like that. I didn't have a recent injury that caused it that I know about. But yeah, for a while I've had some really limited motion in here until I got it diagnosed, but boy, this made a big difference in my range of motion, like you said, just in a few minutes.
Yeah.
So I can see you being a great benefit for employers to get employees back to work faster, getting them back to work moving correctly so that they're not going to re-injure themselves, lowering those costs of, you know, the treatment and the workers' compensation. So every time an employee goes in and ER, gets medications and stuff like that, those build up that work comp mod factor. So
yeah, we work it to get people back to work as quickly as possible and keep them there for as long as possible. We don't want people having repeat injuries. You know, we want to fix the issue, solve the problem, get them back to work so that they're set for the long haul.
yeah, and most importantly is that actual employee getting better, having a better quality of life now and in the future. So it's not just about getting back to work, saving money, making money. It's giving everybody a better quality of life,
Absolutely.
making sure their mechanics are right,
Yeah.
that they're not going to have those chronic long-term injuries, going into retirement or requiring, you know, surgeries and things like that. So,
Absolutely, because you know we don't necessarily just want to think in the now when it comes to our recovery. We want to think of 10, 15, 20 years from now. Like, what is this, you know, if you have a very strenuous job, like what is this job going to do to me in 20 years? And if we're doing these positions and motions with these improper mechanics because our body's, you know, telling us to do it that way, you know, we don't want people to end up with issues down the line when they, you know, when they're retired and they should be relaxing and enjoying life, right? So
absolutely.
yeah.
So for my clients who I foresee that having types of injuries or the mode of injuries that would benefit from what you guys do, I'm definitely going to recommend you to my clients. How would somebody reach out to you? Of course, I'm going to link you in the video and you guys can share it, but how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can find us on our website, Evo Performance Rehab. You can also give me a call or text or email me. I'm sure we can put a link to that somewhere in the description.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure Brett will have and we'll have our information as well to give out. So Evo Performance Rehab, our information's on there, and yeah.
So yeah, I would recommend them if you're personally dealing with an injury that like how you move doesn't feel right, or if you're an employer and you're trying to help employees get that right mechanics so you're not having those work comp injuries. Either way, I would recommend, in either case, I'd recommend them reaching out to you and seeing how you can help.
All right.
So thank you, Dominic.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.